Good evening, brothers and sisters. Perhaps before I begin, I just feel the spirit of connecting our faiths, planted more than a decade ago by Marzouk and his vision. It's an important time for us to be able to gather like this and pray for our nation, pray for the victims of the San Bernardino terrorist attacks. Before I begin, I'd just like to invite all of us to have a moment of silent prayer. We can pray that this kind of coming together can show the world, as the Rabbi just said, that we are agents of peace, we are agents of healing. And this gathering here, each one of you being here is so precious because you are that agent. So let's just have a moment of silent prayer. Amen. Amen. Well, I'm honored and humbled to be on the same, we're not all together on the same podium, but in the same program with Rabbi Jack Ben Parad and Imam Qasim Ahmed from Houston. And it's my first time to be giving the perspective of Christianity. I'm going to be giving it with a unificationist little touch at the end, because I am a unificationist. I did want to make it clear, though, Connecting Our Faiths is a program that goes on throughout the year. This is the first annual appreciation and awards banquet. So you're part of history. You're making the first banquet. In previous events, I've often made the concluding remarks. But tonight it's a real privilege to share Christianity, how Christians see Abraham. One thing that struck me as Rabbi was speaking just now is that when I was praying about talking tonight and what I would share with you tonight, I began to think about all of you coming here. I've had the privilege of actually seeing your names as you were registering and to see who was coming. And I kept thinking, you know what really binds us all together in this room with Father Abraham is that each one of you is a spiritual seeker. Each one of you has such a reverence for God and such a respect of other people's walk with God. And that is really, it's a very precious thing. Hate to say it, but it's kind of an anomaly in our world. To be so open, to be able to come together. I mean, I even heard voices this week saying, you're going to gather a bunch of people from different faiths together in the same room right after San Bernardino? And I said, we had this plan way before that. Yeah. And we've been having these kind of things all the time. It's just our first dinner, and I'm just proud to share this moment with you. So I'll begin by sharing some of the most pointed New Testament verses about Abraham, because the rabbi already touched on the Old Testament verses. Of course, he spoke from Hebrew. But we know that Abraham left his home and went out not knowing what he would expect, what to expect. But there are some verses that Jesus spoke about Abraham that sometimes they cause a little, in their day they caused a lot of consternation, they caused a lot of shaking up. I don't think that was his intention, but in the book of John, the 8th chapter, Jesus refers to Abraham many times. And at one time, Jesus is surrounded by very educated men of the Jewish faith. And he makes the statement that the truth will make you free. The truth will set you free. And they're kind of insulted by that because they've never been in bondage. They've never been slaves. And they think he's talking about physical slavery or physical freedom. And he's talking about spiritual freedom and spiritual liberation. And he followed that by saying, because they said, no, we're the descendants of Abraham and we're free men. We've never been in bondage. And he says to them that, I know that you're Abraham's descendants. He goes on to say in 8:39, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. And of course that sounded like very strong judgment. But when we think about what the rabbi just said, what is Abraham calling us to do? To not be just stuck in religion itself, but to be agents of peace and agents of healing. And you can only be that way if you really are set free through God. Jesus goes on in the 40th verse, "But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth, which I heard from God." Abraham did not do this. Meaning Abraham did not seek to kill the man who's bringing God's truth. "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad." And when he says that, that stirs them up because they say, you're only 30 years old or something like that. And how could Abraham have been able to see your day? And of course, Jesus is speaking spiritually. He's speaking that Abraham, from where he's at spiritually, can see me here at this time and see what I'm here for. But at that time, it caused a strain with the crowd to whom he was speaking to. In Matthew, he actually has some really amazing things to say about Father Abraham. In Matthew chapter 8, verses 10 through 12, he is speaking of the future, of this future that Abraham has pioneered. And he says, "Many will come from east and west and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven." What is Jesus talking about? He's saying that there will be many people from the east and west. You can't categorize them, even within the religions that are here, the three Abrahamic faiths. You can't just put them in a box and say that is what this is. Because Abraham and Isaac and Jacob are out of the box. They're not just prescribed as someone dear to Jews, but they're dear to Christians. Abraham is the father of our faith. And in Matthew 22, he says, "Have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living." And so Jesus was actually saying that the kind of tradition, the kind of modeling, the kind of life that was lived by Abraham and his son Isaac and his grandson Jacob, those lives are lives of integrity, that they're alive, they're not dead. God is the God of the living and not of the dead. I'd like to share a little bit now from a divine principle perspective. And that is, the divine principle is this book here. As unificationists, we kind of think it's a key to unlock the Bible. And because it's got lots of revelations that Reverend started receiving from the age of 15 till the age of 25. And in the divine principle, of course, divine principle starts with the creation, has the fall of man. And from a Christian perspective, Christians believe that through Adam, we all died. And that through Christ, a new Adam, a true Adam, we are born again. We have the opportunity to be born again. And the divine principle clarifies that actually there's a providential course in history that God has to separate good and evil. And we see in the first family that Adam, because of his sin, Adam isn't called to make an offering. Who is asked to make an offering? Cain and Abel are asked to make an offering, and they make an offering. And there's going to be a polarization in that situation because it's supposed to mimic the situation of the archangel and Adam. Adam, in a sense, is like second-born compared to the age of the angels or the archangels. But the archangel, in a sense, spiritually murders Adam through the seduction of Adam and Eve. So Cain and Abel are set up as the first son and the second son. And we already know that there is going to be the birthright should go to the first son. But in the restoration setup, what happens? Favor goes to the second son. The first son is put into this horrible situation where he feels all these feelings of jealousy, of contempt for his brother, because his younger brother's offering has been accepted and his has not been accepted. But actually what's so profound in that, those first few chapters of Genesis is that we don't hear about God speaking to Abel, but God speaks to Cain. God speaks to that firstborn son and tries to comfort him and tries to tell him, if you do well, your offering will be accepted. But if you do not, Satan is couching at the door. Anyway, what happens? The elder brother murders the second brother, and the murder in the first family, physical murder in the first family. But we see that dynamic happen over and over again. And I bring it up because Abraham's family is going to resolve that. First of all, Abraham is going to become a person who actually partners with God. And Abraham makes an offering. We know he makes a physical offering. It's got several stages to it with heifers and rams and birds. And he successfully divides the animals. The animals' division it symbolizes the separation of good and evil. But he does not cut the birds, does he? He doesn't cut the birds. A darkness comes over, and it seems unfair that because of him not making that offering, which we say in the divine principle is a foundation of faith, he doesn't complete that offering. He falls into slumber, and darkness comes over, and then he hears an angry God say, because of this, your descendants will be sojourners in the land for 400 years. And the Jews end up being in slavery for 400 years. Had the divine principle clarifies, had Abraham been able to make a successful foundation of faith by offering the creation, because he couldn't really offer word, there was no word given yet, the commandments weren't given yet. Because if he had made a successful offering, then his two sons, Ishmael and Isaac, would have done the working out of what Cain and Abel did not do. If they had done that, we would be one family. But unfortunately, that responsibility passed on to the children of Isaac. Because the amazing thing is that another stroke of what we could say is indemnity or a payment, a price, is that at another point in time, later on, Abraham is asked to offer his son Isaac. I know that from a Muslim perspective, it's his son Ishmael that is offered. But from the Jewish tradition and Christian tradition, it is Isaac that is offered. Ultimately, for me, to offer one son, can you imagine? I've got 4 sons. And for me to be asked to offer any one of my sons, I don't know if I would possess the faith of Abraham. At a young age, I actually, in my walk as a missionary, I really prayed many times that I could have the faith of Abraham, that I could have the will of Jacob, I could have the wisdom of Solomon. But to really be placed in that position, he offers his son, and his son in turn is faithful to him. And they make a successful offering because he actually doesn't have to offer his son. He's able to offer the ram that's caught in the bushes. But the responsibility of restoring Cain and Abel ends up ultimately with Jacob and Esau. And I believe because of the foundation laid by their grandfather Abraham, they were able to be amazing people and be able to face that situation victoriously. I'd just like to share with you some of Reverend Moon's words about Abraham. I think they're kind of, I don't know, when in his youth he was a Sunday school teacher for about 6 years of his life, and he would pray and pray about each biblical figure, and I don't know if he had revelations about them, but this is some of the things he shared. Abraham brought a revolution to the home of his father, Terah. As a boy, he would kick the idols and say to his father, "Father, what are these idols?" He must have resolved many times, tens of times, someday, with my own hands, I'm going to show him. Abraham was the most loved son of an idol merchant, and he lived well under his parents' care. However, one day God called him, saying, "Abraham, Abraham, you must leave from the house of your father Terah and go to the land I will show you." God did not give him any advanced preparation. The order came to him suddenly like a bolt out of the blue. Yet in that circumstance, Abraham was not supposed to hesitate. He had to leave at once, as if he had been waiting for God's order. He could not say, "Lord, please give me some more time to get ready." He had to depart immediately. Had he not done so, It would have been a grave mistake affecting many generations and even the course of human history. In other words, had Abraham delayed, it would have been a condition that Satan could use, nullifying all God's historical efforts heretofore. Knowing this, those who are to attend God's command must act right away. Suppose Abraham had gone to his parents and said, "Mom, Dad, God has commanded me to leave Ur and to travel to an unknown land. I intend to obey him." They undoubtedly would have said, "Are you crazy?" Therefore, he could not say a word about it. Moreover, his instructions were not just to visit a nearby village. God instructed him to journey to a strange land, as far away as Egypt. Abraham could overcome the obstacles and leave home because he had absolute faith in God's words. His love for God was absolute, greater than his love for his parents, his relatives, or his homeland. To Abraham, nothing was more important than God's command. He cherished it more than his own life. I am sure he stole away in the middle of the night. Suddenly, he found himself wandering like a gypsy. He lived in self-denial. He had given up everything. I'll just conclude with a personal experience I had. It's been my privilege to work with the Universal Peace Federation and 3 pilgrimages to Israel. On my last pilgrimage there 11 years ago, 2004, I was at the large assembly of ambassadors for peace from around the world. And as we were going up the steps to go to the Temple Mount and go to pray first at Al-Aqsa Mosque and then go to the temple where it is believed that Abraham offered Isaac, I was getting all kinds of goosebumps as I was walking the steps, and I was thinking about my ancestors, and the center of our Sephardic family is from Jaén, Spain. And I started this conversation with this ambassador for peace next to me, and she was from Spain, and she was from Jaén. And I was like, whoa! And I as we were going up the steps, I just began, my heart became more and more heavy. And as I was on the Temple Mount for almost 2 hours, all I could do was just bawl like a baby. People were looking at me like, "Are you okay, Mark? Are you okay?" And I was just bawling. But I didn't know why I was bawling. I was just overcome with emotion, My children, for my birthday this year, they paid for a DNA test, and yes, I'm 11 or 13% Middle Eastern. I'm 8% Ashkenazi Jew, which I didn't even know I was Ashkenazi. I thought it was Sephardic. I'm 2% North African, because my father always said that they had come, into Spain, and we were descendants of Moors, and we had Haddad or Hassad in our family, and my grandmother had always passed on the stories. She had raised my father and his brothers and sisters every Shabbat to gather around and say a prayer with the candles, and then the next day they would go to Roman Catholic service, because she was, it was just generations and generations and generations. She really didn't know what she was doing, but she was trying to observe what she had been taught. Anyway, there we are going up there, and I'm just bawling and bawling. And I prayed really intently, as I'm sure I was thinking also that each one of you is so used to doing. And that's really our common bond with Abraham. For Abraham to leave his parents and leave his family and leave everything he knew, he must have prayed deeply. He must have been moved by the heart of God, moved by the Spirit of God. And as I was up there, I kept asking God, why am I overcome with tears? Why can't I only cry? And he said, because something so special happened up here. You see, he said, after the fall, what kind of men, what kind of women were in this world? Everybody's so compromised. Everybody's so compromised and in sin. Abraham came up here with his son, obedient to me, with absolute obedience, the first human being to separate himself from the past and move into a new beginning because he was willing to have faith in me. I stopped him. My angel stopped him from taking the life of his son. He made this place holy ground. This place is holy because he was willing to obey me to such a point of absolute faith and absolute obedience. That's why this place is holy. That's why all people should come here. And it was like it was like a revelation for me, because I realized that faith that Rabbi talked about, that the letting ourselves be instruments of God and instruments of his peace and healing, is truly what we can appreciate Abraham for kicking the door open, and of course appreciating Isaac, his son, and his obedience, and Jacob. Thank you all.